Live from Magnaflow at SEMA 2019. It is Fuel Cult once again, and we've got a veritable array of journalistic and PR type people. I guess we could call it that. I don't know.
Interesting mishmash.
Yeah, people that know each other that
A
generally
pastiche,
like each other.
if you will.
We'll put it
Yeah.
that
I like almost everyone here.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell you which
Notice
one I
she's
don't
not
like.
looking at me.
She barely knows me, so I'm sure she doesn't like me right away.
Okay. So on the end, we've got Brandon Gillogly.
That's me. I'm from Hagerty.
Hagerty. And then we've got my trusty co-host and good friend, Joe Cariotti.
That's me, Joe Cariotti.
And then we got Vinny Russo,
Hello.
representing many people.
Hennessey for the show, as we need here, but many other things.
Stupid fast cars.
Yes.
And we got Elana Scherr of doing many things right now, right? Writing for a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've written for almost everybody except Motor Trend. Motor Trend has never hired me for anything.
Interesting. Okay. And then we've got Freddy, a.k.a. Tavarish Hernandez, on the end.
Yes.
You guys know him from silly Lamborghini builds on the internet?
Yeah. I sometimes make stupid car videos. Yeah.
I think we all are guilty of that.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, but
that's
he does
how I
it
go.
really well, much better than the rest of us.
Yeah, I got to say, dude, that car came out stunning.
Thank you.
Your Mercy is beautiful, and that interior, oh boy.
Thank you. So for those that don't know, it's a 2003 Lamborghini Murcielago, and yes, that is like the right way to say it.
Can you say that again slower for someone with the last name Cariotti?
Yes. Well, it's a Spanish fighting bull, and it's like a Murcielago.
Oh,
So
I like it.
Yeah. So it's the movie car from the last Fast and Furious, and in the movie it went into the ice and blah blah blah. So I bought the hero car from LA and ended up doing a bunch of stuff to it. It was in really, really rough shape. And then over the last 9-10 months, I completely restored it, did some custom work, and now it's here at SEMA. So, yeah.
And
Where can people see it?
It is at the Performance Pavilion, which is a big white tent. It's kind of like the consolation prize. It's not in any of the main halls, but it's kind of front and center in the Rag Company booth number 50519.
So, out of everything on that car, it's beautiful, it sounds fantastic and everything, but I want to talk about what the hell was that coating on the paint? That shit was amazing.
Okay, so I have a interesting coating on the paint. It's called Clarity Coat, and it's basically like a clear tarp that you put over, and it's a sprayable paint protection. I'm not going to get into too many of the details. I don't want to geek people out here, but it's just it's just like regular paint. You can spray it on, you can sand it, buff it, do everything, and if you scratch it really deeply or whatever, you literally just peel it right off, and it comes right out. So, and your paint is totally perfect underneath.
But the impressive part about you putting that on your car is you just put like this insanely expensive paint job on that car,
Right.
and then to go and put this to what most enthusiasts is kind of a new product.
Yeah.
And just throw that on there. That took a lot of trust in the product to be able to do that.
Well, this product is next level,
Yeah.
legitimately. So, I mean, this is a very big disruptor in the market. At least I think so. So, yeah.
No, it's cool.
So, you guys have been around, I think, a little more than like Joe and I have, because we've just been in here sweating it out doing the podcast thing. What are you guys seeing on the show floor that's piquing your interest individually?
Well, I mean, we all expected to see the Supras.
Everything's boring this year, dude. Like, there's nothing interesting.
Did anyone else see the Hot Wheels display outside? Because I geeked out over that big time for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh, the Twin Mill! And I just spent 5 minutes on the Twin Mill, and then, oh, an Opel Manta. A what?
So
a Renault? What?
That display's really cool. I got to see a bunch of those cars. I went to a couple of the Legends tours around the country that I actually was working with Hot Wheels a little bit earlier this year. And so that display at Hot Wheels is an accumulation of the winners of like 19 different cities.
Right.
And then a couple of the Hot Wheels cars that they built real cars out of the Hot Wheels cars. But then the idea is that here they will pick one of those cars to win, and then that person will get their own Hot Wheels created that'll get sold mass market.
There's at least 6 out there that deserve it.
And I mean, like, as far as a car guy goes, I mean, to have your own Hot Wheels, that's a level that none of us will ever get to reach. I mean,
Fun fact, I actually do have that.
Yeah.
But it's not because of me. It's because of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it is like a step up from, what I assume everyone else does, which is just get a Hot Wheels car of your car and then paint it with nail polish to match the color of your car.
This is not that. This is
or if it's like my car, you just put another sun lamp for about 3 years to get that right baked crab patina.
The worst part about the nail polish is it adds such a thick layer. It just kind of impedes the whole.
I mean, you
feeling
can
of the
thin it a
car.
little bit. with
I'm not on that level,
Yeah.
so we should-
I'll
And
teach
then
you.
you
Maybe I
just
should do a
jam
how
it
to.
back in the case
Oh,
and
yeah.
try to make it look
Yeah.
like it came like that. Yeah.
that's the next YouTube video for your channel.
It was
Yes.
it was interesting to see them pick the winners at each of these cities because like they had the actual engineers from Hot Wheels there. And so you go to a normal car show and you're like, oh, this car's great, it's painted this, it's painted that, or whatever. But at the Hot Wheels show, it's all these crazy built cars, but they're looking at it like, how do I make that into a toy? Like I can't. Like they had to scale it down, and they're looking at these cars. They had to pick a winner to be like, this is a potential that I could actually make it into a toy. So there were some really, really insane. Like I was at one in New Jersey, and this guy had a full size shopping cart that fit like 6 people with a small block Chevy in it, and it stood 10 feet high in the air, and like everybody loved it, but he's like, I can't make that into a toy. Like I
Right.
can't make
No
that
one's
into a
gonna
Hot
want to
Wheels.
buy that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was this. I'm really curious to see what car ends up winning that whole thing.
So you're telling me there's not a huge market for Hot Wheel sized shopping carts?
I don't. Apparently, the engineers didn't think so. I'm not really one to speak on that, but yeah.
What do you have to do to be a Hot Wheels engineer? I mean, it's just like, okay, take this car, not just make it little.
I guess. Yeah.
Can you make it little? So, okay, that's your job now.
that's
Done.
probably so everybody. There's probably like so many intricacies to that job,
I'm sure there are,
I'm
but-
gonna stand up for the Hot Wheels engineer. All right,
Listen,
there are so many intricacies.
from where I'm sitting, that job is like, you come in, and you're like, all right, well, just make it small, and then that's it. Like, I'm going on break.
Everything's got there's like material sciences and stuff.
Sure.
I think they have to. I mean, there is like toy sciences and
Right.
stuff, and so you need to have some marketing
Will this kill a
ideas, and then
3-year-old?
also
Yeah.
yes, like
Yeah.
Are
how
these wheels gonna rip
like
off?
how easy is it going to be to swallow, and then but then also like mold making stuff is really important for Hot Wheels, because I have
Yeah.
talked to people before where it's like, I mean, obviously they're going to like a car better if it can be worked off of a mold that they already have. So
Right.
like, oh, all right, a Camaro or 57 Chevy or something, this is great, we only need to make this many changes. And then also, can you pull a mold off of it? Like, so a shopping cart is probably pretty difficult because it's
those
got all these little
intricate
holes.
yeah.
So like stuff's gonna stick in there.
Doesn't lend
See-
itself to die cast.
No.
No. I was gonna say the one that won last year was like an old hot rod looking like what do they call the belly racers where they
Oh,
would
yeah.
take the from the plane,
Like a belly
drop
tank.
tank.
the
yeah.
belly tank,
Oh, yeah.
but it had a 2J in it,
Of course it did.
and it was all completely.
well, it was
insane.
either that or
Yeah.
an LS.
Mhm.
One of the two.
No, well, because of the shape, he went with the 2J. So
Oh,
it was
yeah,
it
that
was
does make sense.
yeah.
It's a little narrower.
team.
I mean, obviously there are supers everywhere.
I haven't seen any. They're pretty rare here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
you guys look outside and see there's at least a dozen 60 to 66 Chevy trucks here, which are always kind of like took a back seat to the 67 to 72, but there's a bunch of them here this year.
Well, yeah, because
Lifted, lowered,
nobody can get any more C-body 67.
to
They've all been
72s.
built.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been done.
But I like that body style though. Yeah,
Mhm.
there is a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's even a
So,
60 with a reared, funky, like twin eyebrow headlight.
That's cool.
I mean, twin
That's
hood.
cool.
So I wanted to ask you guys. Some of you are more expert in this. I am not into the older stuff, and I know Elana, you really are. Like, what's something that would bridge the gap? Like, I love '90s nostalgia stuff.
Okay.
Like, what would bridge the gap for me to get into like muscle cars? Because I never like I asked a bunch of people like, can you just like explain it to me? Like, I don't understand what the appeal of like a muscle car is, and I really do want to understand.
All right, well, let's see. If you're thinking about 90s cars, I mean, what are your feelings about like the first Vipers?
The first Vipers are great. I actually owned one, and it is horrifying to drive, but it looks really cool.
Oh, so you get a muscle car then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is basically what a muscle car is. It's just so much horsepower. It's a smaller body than you would expect for the amount of power that it's making,
Right.
and a kind of. I mean, it's unfair because here, so much of what we're doing here is fixing. I'll say fixing. Let's assume that it's a problem. Fixing what people see to be the limitations of a muscle car in terms of the handling and
Sure.
the predictability.
Or at least modernizing them and bringing
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
up to standard, right?
But I think it's interesting if you start reading, you read car reviews, and even though everybody is so stoked on all of the new technology, I've started hearing the words boring or dull, or it's like the speeds that you have to go in a modern car are so high to be thrilling.
Yeah.
And so there are two ways of having something be thrilling at a slower speed. One is to have a stick shift and a high revving engine, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
little
Right.
slow car fast thing.
Mhm.
And the other is to have not good enough suspension and not good enough tires, and then you just do
Just shoddy
burnouts
build
and
quality.
donuts, and you're not going
Yeah.
that
And
fast.
brakes
Like,
that are more of a suggestion than an actual implementation.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I am a fan of brakes. I think that not having good brakes is not actually ever fun.
Okay.
But I think not having good traction is fun. I
But-
think that having to take all the responsibility for traction onto yourself and do it with your foot,
Mhm.
for example, the Red Eye Hellcat's been out, and I have heard some people say, oh, well, really, I like the 392 Scat Pack better because, it's just so much more fun to drive because it's so much more controllable. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, but have you considered an 1/8 inch of throttle instead of a half?
Yeah.
Because
No.
then you have more later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I want to go fast now. So what do I do?
The one thing that the muscle cars have going for it, and we talked about this with the Ring Brothers a little bit. Go check out that show. But the one thing they have is they're narrow, so you
Mhm.
get more road to play with, and they're not as controllable. Like, you have to be a better driver.
Those aren't good things.
But it makes you a better
not a good
driver.
thing.
You're not selling it.
Yeah.
But I believe you.
Yes.
The great thing about muscle cars is that they're hard to control. They have shoddy build quality, and they're not very fast.
I didn't say anything about the build. It's as good as
Yeah,
you make
that's
it. What's
unfair.
fine.
That's
What
unfair.
el-
They're
what
not.
el- what
They're
el-
actually better than equivalent import cars of the time.
Oh,
or
no,
whatever,
of the
you know.
time, yes. I'm
What
just-
what it translates down to is personality. It's that the older muscle cars have a certain character and a certain personality that you can't duplicate with a modern car. Be it the patina, be it the smell,
Just
the
the presence,
sound,
right?
the
Yeah.
presence. And for me, like I own a '65 Caddy Coupe,
oh yeah, that's
so
awesome.
I'm around 1,000 horsepower cars all the time. I
Right.
get my fair share of whatever speed I want.
Mhm.
But I get in that car, and even though it's not technically a muscle car, but it's it's an older car. The world slows down for me. Like I'm
Right.
not in a rush to go anywhere. There's something about it that it just kind of. And even with an older muscle car, you can drive them fast, but you can't appreciate modern brakes until you drive a car with four-wheel drums.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had a
you
75
can't
Dart.
you can't
yeah,
really
I know.
appreciate some of the things. I mean, so for me, for a muscle car, it's that there's a certain personality to it, and the same thing with Japanese supercars versus like something like your Mercy. It's
Right.
the Italian cars and the European cars have a certain personality to it, and for me, it's always been that. I mean,
Mhm.
when you're at SEMA, these cars are not transportation.
Yeah.
None of these cars are transportation for anybody. So you're buying an experience, and the same way that you choose your vacation based on the experience you want to have while you're on vacation is the same way you would choose whatever it is that you're into with a car.
Mhm.
And so for somebody with a muscle car, you can't duplicate that muscle car experience
That's
with
true.
any mono car, whether
Yeah.
it be a Hellcat or not.
Mhm.
Well, and I think maybe Brandon would back me on this one. For me, one of the things that's so exciting about that time period of cars, whether it's muscle cars or else, or stuff from Europe or Japan, but in particular muscle cars, is that the connection between the racing and the actual production automobiles is
Yeah.
so much closer in a way that
Right.
that you never see again. Like that, the end of the end of the 60s, 1970 basically is the beginning of a race car being its own thing, to
Yeah.
chassis and, carbon fiber, fiberglass bodies and engines that are built specifically for racing. So
Right.
if you get in a GTO,
Mm-hmm.
the relationship of a GTO to what someone was drag racing in
Mhm.
1966 is so much closer than anything else. If you get if you get a Charger, the relationship between the Charger and NASCAR is
It's quite large.
you know,
yeah.
and so then
Yeah.
you have this connection to the history and to the stories of the people who were doing those developments and making. And they're just so freaking brave,
Well, and I
man.
think a
Like
prime
it's
example
insane.
of that would be like the Superbirds and everything like that. That was
Right.
specifically engineered for NASCAR
Mhm.
and then made it out to the street with very little modification, from what I understand.
Yeah, I just came from the Wing Car and Aero Car reunion in Talladega.
Mhm.
I'm working on a story for Road and Track about that.
Oh,
so
awesome.
plug for them. But yeah, it's bizarre to see. I was in Alexander City, which is a very small town,
Mhm.
and there were 150 wing cars in this town.
Wow.
So they're in every
Wow.
parking lot, they're on the street, and they look like spaceships even now. I mean, you're talking about
Yeah.
Hot Wheels. I felt like I had been dropped into like a kid's toy box, like I'd been shrunk down and dropped into a kid's toy box because they were just so wild
Right.
and so ugly beautiful.
Oh no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So, there's stuff like that you just kind of can't get unless you go back to when it was that Wild West.
The way the
Yeah.
nose cone fits just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Oh, I know about things fitting wrong. Like that's my
Well,
world.
you've been working on an Italian car.
Yes,
Yeah.
Italian cars are oof, especially the very hand-built ones.
Yeah.
So you'll have a bolt that's supposed to go in a specific hole, and then you'll see a self-tapper right next to that bolt because they couldn't be bothered to put that bolt in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the underbody on the Mercies are always a little dicey. Especially you start looking at some of the welds, and you're like, I know I can weld better than that.
Yeah, like I've never welded, and I'm pretty sure I could do a better job.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, we have some journalists here, right? I've been on both sides of this as far as like it's not even a dichotomy. It's like, the journalist influencer type thing. And I know a lot of people have like some strong opinions. I don't know what, is there an animosity between the two? Is there like, a issue with like access to cars, or is like, because I can see both sides of this story, because a lot of journalists, they don't like the term influencer. They don't like the concept of an influencer. And I don't know. I just wanted to get your opinions on that.
I can almost hear Mike Spinelli just groaning
Oh.
right now.
I know that any influencer that got a car after most journalists were done with them would hate journalists. So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, my opinion with the influencer versus, journalist is just, I think it really comes down to how did the influencer become an influencer? I mean, if you're talking like a Kim Kardashian who didn't do anything and she's all of a sudden is now an influencer, and in the automotive world, we have our Kim Kardashians in there as well, as opposed to somebody, a little bit more like you that shows that you've got some street cred, that you're actually doing things and you've kind of earned your level of influence. And it's the same thing with a journalist. I mean, if you're a decent writer, I mean, you kind of have to earn that respect. And
Sure, but you
I-
can also get put into a situation where you just get hired and then you go on some press trip and
sure,
then that's
but I mean,
it.
as an influencer, I'm sure there's journalists that you're like that you don't respect their opinion because you don't feel like they really maybe have earned their position.
I don't think there's any difference at all, except that one's on staff and one has made their own outlet. I would say that the only difference between an influencer and a journalist, and this is getting smaller and smaller, is whether or not you have an edit and fact check team behind you, and that
Yeah.
is the only reason why any of us who are on the journalism side look any better than people who are on the influencer side. Like, there's nothing else that's different about it. If you love cars, if you love what you're doing, if you want to tell stories, none of that is taught in
But I-
journalism school, which I did not go to, by the way.
I can
Right.
also argue, though, that when it comes down to actually fact checking and things like that, a lot of places are not as thorough as they were. I mean,
Oh, that's what
look
I'm
at
saying.
the debacle that just happened with Motor Trend when they released their numbers on the C8.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know association, so I'm not going to make you comment on that, but
I got
What do you
nothing.
think,
I
Elana?
was not involved, and I am not involved.
but
You were the one
that was-
driving, right?
I was actually running the dynos, so sorry about that.
Yeah, that was such
Yeah,
a
just carry that one.
massive screw up. I couldn't even believe that they printed that.
Yeah, I mean, well, screw ups happen all the time,
Yeah.
and it is because the staffs are so much less, the budgets are so much less, and that's what I'm saying is I really don't think there's any difference. I think that, if you're good at your job and, you have an idea of personal ethics, it doesn't matter whether you're
Right.
doing it for your own channel or
Mhm.
you're doing it for a magazine that's paying you.
Sure.
And the opposite as well. I mean, there are plenty of journalists who probably would not want their connections to, to people who they should be more neutral about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think with this, it's more like, I first of all, I hate the term influencer because it already associates you with like, I don't know, like Logan Paul or something, trying to go to Suicide Forest.
Yeah, it's
and-
got an ick factor to
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There's a that sort of thing.
I'm an influencer.
Yeah, but then you have the capital J journalists that are like, I speak only truth. I don't think that that's true either. So I think influencer are more it's a better term to call them like entertainers, because it's not necessarily like you're giving an unbiased opinion or an objective anything. It's just like you're showing features of something. So I could be like, let's say I have a car. I'm not going to be like, I'm going to give you a review of a car. I'm just going to tell you what I think, or like I'm going to give you like the features of this car and why it would be cool. And obviously, if they, if an influencer or anybody doesn't disclose that they're like being paid by somebody, that's a dick move, right?
Yeah.
But
and illegal now, actually.
Yeah, I know that's like literally legal.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you're just like, hey, they invited me out here, and I think this car is kind of cool, and here are the features of the car. I don't think there's really anything wrong with that, and I don't think that there's any lack of journalistic integrity if you consider yourself an entertainer.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we get certainly people we know that that cross that are right on that line, and they make that very, very clear. I mean, to be blunt about it, Matt's on that line, and he makes it very abundantly clear of when this is, I'm just going to go out and do something cool because I got invited, versus just going through and doing the R&T, the road and track, test, for car of the year.
Yeah.
That's very clear delineation between those two worlds. And I think so long as you're up front, you can actually live in both of those places comfortably.
I mean, I'm just waiting for somebody to be willing to pay me to sell out, but it has not happened yet.
I can listen. So the OEMs, they don't sell out like traditionally, right?
Yeah.
Because I wish they would. But it's more like other companies, like all the companies here. If you just go and say, hey, I have this channel that gets X amount of views, maybe you can send me some parts. Maybe you can give me a little
6 views.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're all from friends, but they're really, really influenced
They are
views.
diehard fans.
My mom watched that video twice, so it's really good.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest. I've certainly taken parts for coverage, but I've been upfront about it, and I will only do it with brands where I respect the stuff that they're putting out.
If it's going on your car, you're not going to go to Joe Schmo and their coilovers just, for the hell of it.
Right.
Oh, Joe Schmo coilovers?
The best. The
I
best.
think they're the South.
I've had 6 sets of them on my car.
It's so good.
Yeah. The Schmoilovers.
I think though, from like the company side though, it's easier to work with the influencer because you can influence the influencer more.
Not necessarily. I mean, listen. When I was with Jalopnik, and I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
But you did, but that's okay.
I know. I did, and I'm going to continue talking.
This is a good point you're about to make. I'm ready.
Okay. All right. It might not be as good of a point as you think, but
It better be great.
bar's high.
when I was working at Jalopnik, I was like, there were all these press events that I went to, and I went to like one of the Porsche launch events, like the Panamera. They flew me out to their test track in Germany. We went on the Autobahn with these brand new Porsche Cayenne Turbo S's. This was like, the ticket alone was $8,000. The ticket alone. So they already invested in me going there. They're showing me a good time, keeping me at great hotels. That doesn't that's not in a vacuum, right? You're not going to be like, all right, we're gonna go in this car, this brand new car with all these cool features, and you can be like, you know what? I don't like the button placement. Like, you're not going to be like that. They know what they're doing.
No, absolutely. I just think that as someone who considers themselves, not speaking, a journalist, if they consider themselves a journalist, they might hold themselves to a higher standard. Obviously, this is all
you can
general.
But you've got the opposite side of this, is that you've been on the marketing side, Vinny.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your take on dealing with quote unquote the real journalist versus an influencer, and how you might approach those two different people.
I mean, you take your chance with a real journalist. You try, and if you're going to send them a product or put them in a car, you like to have a relationship with them, know ahead of time what there is a kind of car that they tend to gravitate towards. You're not going to put somebody in a car to do a review if you know that they're not going to appreciate a high horsepower car, because they're just going to review it and be like, this is insane. What do I need a 1,000 horsepower car to go to the grocery store in, when they're used to reviewing flexes and things like that. So you just, from that side of it, you try and match the journalist a little bit better than, with an influencer. You just kind of, you know them usually well enough to say, okay, well, you're going to get it. And they're usually so grateful to get something that they find some sort of a an angle that they end up liking.
That's the point I was getting at. Is the influencer is more willing to speak better of something because they're more grateful to get the thing.
Okay.
If you're getting it,
It all depends on
at the end of the day. At the
yeah.
end of the day, it's advertising. It's the same way you're going to decide where you want to place an ad.
Mhm.
You're whether you're going to place an ad on TV or on radio, if you're going to place it on a certain station or not. So it's the same thing. I mean, it's advertising, and you have to target your product to the right audience.
Right.
And there are going to be times where you don't have control over that,
Mhm.
but most of the time you do, and that's part of the job that somebody in the marketing department is supposed to be doing, or the
Sure.
PR department.
And marketing department, I mean, it's basic human psychology.
Yeah.
Humans don't act radically different just because they're in a different position. So if you treat them nicely, if you're a stand-up company, let's say they're willing to forgive a few faults.
Right.
Like just generally, you might do it unconsciously.
But you also
Subconsciously, not unconsciously.
but that gives a certain amount of validity to their audience, because you want them to be honest, and at the end of the day, you want to put out a product that's good enough that they're not going to find a ton of faults.
Oh
in
no,
it.
I mean like that is,
And
so that is honest. That is honest.
You want
but-
them to be a little bit honest, like
Yeah.
So like if you're reviewing, like we had Hennessey brought out the new Ranger that we
Right.
did, the Velociraptor Ranger,
Mhm.
which is kind of a surprising truck. We gave it to everybody from Spike Ferenstein, and Matt reviewed it. All these different journalists reviewed it, and the one thing that Hennessey can't control is the 10-speed transmission that's in that truck, which is kind of
which is
subpar.
crap.
But the rest of the truck was actually kind of cool, and but to the viewers or the listeners or the readers or whatever the media happens to be, it's like you want them to explain and say, look, I like the truck, but the transmission's crap, but this is why.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure to educate the influencer. You spend some time with the journalist and say, here's what we did, understand everything. It takes some time, because you can really screw up. You give the car to the wrong person, and they're gonna it's gonna backfire on you bad.
So long story short, know your audience.
Know your audience.
Yeah.
well, I think the key is, you said it. It's all advertising.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's
Yeah,
advertising.
yeah.
So it's a good topic, man.
Yeah, I was thinking about this for a while, because I'm friends with a lot of these influencers that have been at odds with the journalist community,
Yeah.
especially in the auto, and like I know everybody,
Right.
and everybody
Right.
here knows everybody. It's a really really small community. So when like you're like, hey, you're talking like they're talking about my friend, like I know this guy and I also know this guy. It's like there's some disconnect
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
So
And
I just wanted to
it's hard, because you want to get your product out to everybody, but there are certain people that just aren't going to get it.
Mhm.
And so you have to kind of be like, yeah, I'll let you drive that, but understand it's not your cup of tea. I know ahead of time you're not going to like it.
I mean, Dan Neal, you put him in an F5, and you know what you're going to get out of it. He's going
Right.
to. It's fun, but pointless.
Right.
That's what Dan will say.
Right. But sometimes you need those articles as well. Sometimes you need that, because at the end of the day, the audience wants it. People want a little bit of honesty every once in a while, and you just have to be confident in your product.
I don't even think it's necessarily honesty, because you can be honest in any like an influencer can be honest.
Yeah.
It's just a different perspective.
Right.
So I have a friend. His name is Matt Mormon. He does detailing,
Right.
and he is he's a biased party in that he has a brand that resells detailing supplies. But he goes and does these reviews because he's very frank with these like companies. So companies will send him product. They'll come and do like demonstrations in front of him, and he'll just go to them like, is like, this is crap, like to their face.
Yeah.
And that's just that's the person he is. So people come to expect that from him, even though like he does have a vested interest in, like, let's say something else. Like
Yeah.
he'll disclose that, but just it's, I think it has to do with that perspective. Same as Dan Neal or Elana or any of you.
Right.
Okay,
Agree.
so slightly different topic. Most of the people here have too many vehicles. Okay.
Wait.
I
What's too
don't
many?
think that's true at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too many scenes. I was like, that's an opinion. That's your opinion.
That is an opinion, and it's a silly one. I have a
Has my
space-
wife contacted you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could try and define at what point we personally would think it was too many.
Well,
Yeah.
I draw the line at when I have to park curbside. That's too many.
That's all I
that's
have.
fair. Yeah,
Yeah, but
he only
like,
has curbside,
For
and
those of
people
us that
keep
lived
hitting
in
his
Florida,
cars.
there is no
That's-
curbside.
There is no curbside. I have a 5,200 square foot
Yeah.
shop. That is not a.
You
not
can
an
buy
issue.
a shop like that for like what, $1.50 there?
Yeah, dollar.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
$1.75 now. Times
Yeah.
are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, how many cars do you have at your place right now?
I think it's a dozen now. It might be 13.
Okay. Any dump trucks still, or
Yeah, we still have the dump truck. In fact,
so cool.
we've only been adding vehicles. We have not got rid of anything.
Can you put cars in the dump truck?
Yeah, I could fit the Opal in the dump truck.
That'd be cool.
That is awesome. That'd be an
Kinda
awesome
cool.
tow vehicle.
Or the Manx. The Manx would fit in the dump truck, no problem.
Oh yeah, that.
You have a Manx?
I have, well, earlier before we came on, we were about just trying to find how much of something you need to have done for it to be a car and how much of something you actually need to have for it to be a project and not just like a
I think
fender.
the Manx, you just need the shell.
Yeah, I have
There's
the
not a lot there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
then-
have the
then
shell
you got a
and,
Manx. You
and
got a
the
Manx. Yeah, that's fine.
chassis as
Yeah,
well,
that's fine.
actually.
Is it a real Manx?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Brandon's seen it.
I have intake manifolds for engines I've never owned.
That's okay. That's okay. I don't know.
Someday.
That might
someday.
not be a project car,
No.
but
It's a prayer, a wish.
It's not.
Well, but what if
You
you
gotta
had the
start somewhere.
intake and the engine? Does that count as a project?
yeah, I would.
I mean, it's a project, but I don't know if it's a project car.
In that case,
if
you've got
you have that with the intention of putting it in something eventually,
What if
as
he
opposed to a
had
coffee table,
the intake, the engine, and a fender?
then you have art.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
That sounds like
Yeah.
interior decorating.
It depends on what your intention is with those parts. Is it to have them just to hang on the wall, or are you going to someday want to, even if your intention is so far-fetched that it'll probably never happen, but if you could someday own the car that went with that intake manifold, you would? Yeah, it's a project car.
at which part of Theseus' ship is the VIN etched? That's the question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We could say project car equals VIN number. I mean, that would be.
I think project car equals hope, and everybody just needs a little hope sometimes. You know,
So, if
like
you-
you just got the pieces laying
Yeah.
around. You're like, one day,
Okay.
you.
So, what's your next project car, Brandon?
My next project?
Yeah.
Well, the current project is the Pontiac where the engine is in Alana's garage right now and has been for about 2 years.
It's all done. It's ready. We could run it on the test stand.
But we haven't yet.
Let's run it on the test stand.
We need to run a fuel line and drop the distributor.
And what is the Pontiac?
The 64 Le Mans,
Okay.
Cool.
which
very
has
cool.
been not driven in my front yard or not, parked on the street for going on 2 months now. So
Joe, what's your next project?
Oh my God, Chris.
And it's
so
gonna
I-
be something weird. I already know.
Oh, I see. This is the thing. Ever since I had a kid, I've gotten less weird because I just need things to work a little bit better. But
He owned an SVX for a while.
it was
wow.
a 5-speed manual
Ooh,
conversion.
swap.
Wow.
Oh, man,
There you
it was
go.
that EG33 engine ripped. I miss it, but I sold it for a Miata because I still wanted something fun to drive and I just wanted something reliable. Anyway,
No, he had a Big Mac addiction and he couldn't get it through the window.
it was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
too, definitely. Like, anyway, after enough people ask you if your Subaru is a Ferrari, then you know, like. But yeah, I don't know. I think next
You just say
thing-
yes, dude.
Yeah, definitely. You see you can't afford it. It's a Ferrari.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I think the next project is actually redoing my E150 conversion van. It's not even like a good year. It's just like a 2000s. But I think it'd be really cool to make it like an old boat on the inside.
Is it the 6 or the 8?
It's a 5.4 liter. So like,
Okay, so the Triton V8.
yeah,
cool.
it's like it was like a guy's horse hauler for like a long time, and he retired from work and gave it to me for like $300 something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I'm not going to pass up a 2000 Econoline for it runs and drives.
Yeah, why not?
Let's do it. So right now I have my Navigator, I have my Miata. Navigator's the family vehicle, and I'm just trying to figure out what do I do with this van because I got it, I love it, but I don't need it, and I could probably like get something cooler or better or something that works.
What's the
Like
Japanese van racing?
Oh,
well,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
The Dajibon.
There you go.
Dajibon, yeah.
I followed that guy on Instagram. Or
Yeah.
there's one-
Noriara, yeah.
Yes, I want one. I would rather have a Ram van and do that.
Do a Ford. Do
Oh, yeah.
something different. You can still make a Ford race van.
Well, I mean, speaking of vans,
they make-
I just I don't know. You probably have all seen the articles about that Pimp My Ride van that was for sale in Boston.
No.
I haven't.
Okay, so there's a Pimp My Ride van that was featured on the show. It was a Dodge Caravan, and it was for sale in Boston. And it's no longer for sale because I bought it.
No.
Oh
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Van life.
So I have no idea what it needs, but I figure it's a Dodge Caravan. It's probably not that much. You know, like how bad could it be? And also, I want to see how, what the quality of a Pimp My Ride show van.
Oh, I can
The
already answer
the
that.
build quality is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's epic.
This should be
dude.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's your next project.
It's not my next project. It's one of my next. I have like 20,000.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You've got too many.
that's too many. Yeah.
Okay, Vinny, what's your next project?
So I just repurchased my 65 Caddy that I owned a few years ago, and so I'm just getting that back up to speed.
Are you bringing it out here, I assume?
It's at Matt's house.
Oh, it
yeah.
is? Okay.
I drove it from. So that car, I had it in Florida, sold it to a guy in Dallas who drove it to Dallas, and then he sold it to a guy in San Francisco who drove it again to San Francisco. Now they're talking a 50-year-old car.
Yeah.
And then I bought it back off of him. I met him in Monterey, and I bought it off him and just drove it back down to L.A. So my next project that I purchased, believe it or not, is a bike. I bought a Suzuki M109R, which is a Suzuki's largest boulevard cruiser. It's like an 1800cc insane boulevard cruiser. The pistons are bigger than a 502 big block. It's like this 150 horsepower just monster that I just fell in love with. It's the most asinine thing that I absolutely do not need. But
How many cylinders?
Just 2 cylinders.
2 cylinders. Okay.
A 2-cylinder 1800cc. I mean, but it's a bruiser. I mean, it'll keep up with a 1000cc sport bike, but it's 700 pounds.
I've seen these.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
they have.
Shaft drive. It's very futuristic. Yeah, it's kind of futuristic looking. And I found one that was a rare limited edition called the M109R2. And I fell in love with it and just kind of had to have it. So that's my new project.
If you're into bikes at all, I mean that's really cool. But they have that swept look.
Yeah,
I went
it's very,
through a
very
phase
swept.
where I was into bikes, and I was like, "That's a cool one."
And that was the thing is I was looking for a TL 1000R, and then I'm like, I'm going to do something stupid on a sport bike.
Yep.
And so I started looking at these cruisers, and I came across this one, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And I was like, I don't need this, but it's just super cool.
Victories have a similar
We're
look.
in a hallway full of nothing of need.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't feel too guilty.
So-
about
That
it.
is
and the
not
thing-
true, my friend. How dare you?
And it's hard for me with a project. I mean, I got access to so many different things between Matt stuff and all the stuff I get a hold of. We have so many different cars that come through the house that it just none of us really need another project. So
No, and Hannah might hang one of you guys.
yeah, because now we have the van and everything else. So it's fun.
Yeah. Alana, what's
Yeah.
what's your next project?
When I get home, we are going to start work on a 1981 Turbo Trans Am.
Nice.
Ooh.
I was going to ask
Yeah.
about
Boost
turbo
gauge on the
Trans Ams
hood?
earlier.
It has the chicken on the
Yeah.
hood, and in fact, this is a fun fact that I learned from buying a 1981 Turbo Trans Am. The turbo chicken is not the same as the non-turbo chicken.
It is not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wait. Is there like a red thing around it? I'm trying to.
The head is turned differently. It's like turned up more, like he's looking up higher, and he's barfing more fire.
Ooh.
I like that they had 2 different part
Yeah.
numbers for,
Yeah.
for the stickers.
Well, because the hood is
Yeah, the
different,
hood's
because it has
different,
an offset scoop.
Cocaine is a hell of a
Oh.
drug.
So,
Right.
so the whole chicken is offset
Because there's the
differently.
boost gauge is in the scoop on that, right?
Yeah, turbo.
That's a hot air intake on that one, right?
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
no
yeah,
intercooler,
it
right?
is a bad setup.
Yeah.
It is
Is that a
how
blow-through carb?
It is how not to do.
Ooh.
It is a draw-through carb. It is not a blow-through.
Oh, draw through. Okay.
It draws through the turbo and then into what Tom refers to as the, I believe it's thermostat housing, which is what the intake looks. It necks down to something that's obscenely tight.
Yeah.
It's just bad.
Tom's my husband for people who are not Brandon.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's awesome. That's really cool.
And actually, that kind of links back to, you were saying a bridge somewhere between classic muscle cars and 90s cars.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking specifically an early 90s third-gen F-body turbo Trans Am with the Grand National motor.
That
Oh,
is
yeah.
amazing. My neighbor had that, and it was insane. It was great. I love that car.
It's such an oddball vehicle, and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
very rare.
The
Mhm.
Typhoon Cyclone is a good transition car too, as far as that goes.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, yeah. Cool.
Chris, do you have any projects?
Well, my C6, I am accumulating parts to finish that off, but my time has not been very freely available for the last year and a half, but that's starting to let up a little bit. I'm here after all, so.
There you
Your
go.
C6 is a Grand Sport, correct?
No, it started life as a regular narrow body C6,
Mhm.
and then somebody ran into it,
Okay.
so I was like, screw it, I'll go wide body.
Now it's even narrower.
Yeah. Well, he did a wide body, so now it's back to normal.
Yeah, the only thing is I have to ditch I put big ass wheels and tires on that thing. I had a 335 in the rear,
Mm-hmm.
and it was 18s all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
You can't buy tires that are staggered like that anymore for a C6.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so I'm having to go back to a factory wheel size.
So what do you have to buy when it's something like that? Do you use that Goodyear supercar EMT whatever red flat thing?
No, actually, you can get a Pilot Sport on there, and BF actually
Yes.
produces something that fits too.
Yeah.
You probably had a similar problem with the Mercy.
Yeah, I had a big problem with the Michelin saved my build.
I
Like
saw that,
Michelin
yeah.
really like went above and beyond because I called them. So the car was getting picked up on Monday. I called them on like a Thursday night, and I was like, "These tires are way too tall and way too wide. All of my fenders are rubbing. Every single one. The paint is not gonna like. It's just gonna rub through the paint and the fender and everything. So I was like, we need to get thinner tires. So I just ordered some. They said, okay, we can overnight it to you from Illinois. And then it got there like Monday morning. I put it on my tire machine and then drove the car, and it was beautiful. No rubbing or anything.
And that was
like,
an expensive shipping bill, I'm sure.
Yeah. But listen, SEMA Crunch, man.
Yeah, I know.
SEMA Crunch is real.
I know.
So, it's better. Like I had to have the car drivable. So it's either,
Oh yeah, not
it's either
optional
that
at all.
or it's either that or
I
nothing.
mean, so now, I mean, I saw the gap on that. Is it still? Do you think it's still rub out on full bottom out on the
No.
suspension? Or?
No. So I got it. So it's a very, very slight stretch. And if you've ever had Michelin PS4Ss on your car, they run a little girthy. They run a little fat.
Mm-hmm.
So you always.
I'm right here. I can hear you.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
Why is it always about size with you women?
Yeah.
I don't even understand the context, but I laughed.
I'm 12, and what is
I
this?
stole that joke from Brandon, actually.
So, like, you just get something like 10 or 20 millimeters undersized, and it'll basically be dead on.
Yeah, because the suspension articulates and pulls it up.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in.
So it'll just tuck up into the fender well instead of like smashing right into it like it was doing before.
Yeah.
But I mean it's fine. It's a little bit thinner. It's 325 on the rear, and then 225 on the front.
Oh, cool.
Which introduces. I haven't had it at the limit, so it's probably some understeer or
Yeah, I was
whatever.
gonna say
but
that's got to introduce a bit of understeer.
the car is it's very light at the front end in any case,
Yeah.
and also this one's rear-wheel drive, so a little lighter still.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you need to be careful with that car with the front drive disengaged because that car was not designed as a rear-wheel drive car.
Oh, not at all. And also, that car, if I have the traction control on, if I give it any more than 25% throttle, it totally cuts all power.
Yeah.
So the only way you can drive that car is with traction control off.
Right.
Which makes things very interesting.
Yeah. Over the years, I've known a couple of guys that have converted their all-wheel drive V12 Lambos to rear-wheel drive, thinking they're cool, and they crashed.
Well, I don't think I'm cool, but if somebody else wants to
I
make
don't see you
that-
driving that car.
That's the safety.
quite that hard.
Yeah.
The
Listen, I don't
coolness
think
is
I'm cool, right?
implied.
No, he's talking about guys who think they're cool.
Yeah.
Not talking about me. Yeah.
No, of course not. No. You were cooler than the rest of us ever could wish we were.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, we're getting the light here, so we're not gonna run it like like
All
some
right.
people do. So, Brendan, where can everybody find your stuff?
My stuff's on Hagerty.com, and my Instagram, which I don't really use, is Brandang, which is BRANDANG, which is my last initial.
Yep. Joe, where can people find you?
You could find me here on Fuel Cult, or if you want to check me out on Instagram, it is Joe Q Car. Thanks.
Vinny.
I guess Instagram Vinny Russo 1, super
Okay.
exciting with
You're
a Y.
You're here for Hennessey.
And I'm
so-
here with Hennessey, so we a couple of cars out here at the show. So Hennessey Performance as well.
Great.
All right. Lana?
How much time have we got? I currently have some stories in issues of Hagerty, Automobile, and Hot Rod. I'm working on something for Road and Track. I do new car review video for Edmunds.com.
Mm-hmm. You can
And-
usually find you by looking up Challenge Her.
Yes. If you just want to know what I'm doing in my life, it's Challenge Her. And that's on Instagram, that's on Twitter, and now that's on YouTube too.
Nice.
Cool. And Freddie.
Just look up Lamborghini on YouTube, and you'll probably run into
You
one
did
of my
two in a
videos.
row.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Tavarish on YouTube.
Just look for the
or just Google it or
big
whatever. yeah, it's
orange
fine.
one.
Just
Yeah.
Google me. Just Google me.
Yeah, Google me. No.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this
Yeah.
episode of Fuel Con. I
Awesome.
got to thank Magnaflow again for being the gracious hosts they are. Go to magnaflow.com. Check out their exhaust systems. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for coming
Thank you.
by.
Thanks for having
you.
us.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Super fun.
Thanks for coming.